Hello, this is Claus Jensen presenting a game from the Bazna Kings tournament held in Romania in early June. And what you're about to watch is the first round clash between world number 1 and tournament winner Magnus Carlsen and Tata steel chess winner from earlier this year, Hikaru Nakamura. Carlsen is playing white and Nakamura is black, and we start off with d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3 and bishop e7, and we have a queen's gambit declined. C takes d, e takes d, bishop f4, c6, and after queen c2, Nakamura makes an early decision regarding his light squared bishop on c8. He had the option of developing his bishop to f5 by playing g6 first, but he decided to go for bishop g4, e3, bishop h5, bishop d3, and bishop g6, and Nakamura has spent 3 moves with this bishop already, and Carlsen happily trades it off now. Bishop takes g6, h takes g6, giving Carlsen a lead in development. Castle long, knight f6, and f3, taking away e4 and g4 for the knight, and also preparing e4 at the right time. Knight bd7, knight ge2, b5, e4, b4, knight a4, d takes e, f takes e, and queen a5, and now king b1 moves the king away from the potentially open c file and protects a2 if the knight goes away from a4 to c5. Castle. So now we have this interesting position with many ideas and chances for both sides, and the problem for Carlsen is that his knight on a4 does nothing but forcing his queen to defend it. And playing b3 followed by knight b2 is not only slow, it also concedes the a3 and the c3 squares. So instead, Carlsen decided to ignore the knight a4 problem for now, and instead play h4, hoping to be able to open up the black king position. Rook f e8 followed, and Carlsen now played e5, and he has to play e5 before he plays h5, because if he plays h5 immediately, then after g5, bishop c1, then the e4 pawn could fall, because Carlsen's queen is overloaded. It has to protect both the knight on a4 and the pawn on e4, so knight takes e4 is possible here, and after queen takes e4, then queen takes a4. So Carlsen had to play e5 first, and so he did, and here Nakamura has been criticized for not playing knight g4, because the idea now is that after h5, g5, bishop c1, he now has knight f2, forking the white rooks. And after h6, knight takes h1, rook takes, g takes, rook takes. Nakamura has won an exchange, but Carlsen's initiative still looks dangerous after knight f8 to defend the mate on h7. So instead of playing knight g4, Nakamura played knight d5, and then came h5. And first we can note that Naka cannot trade on f4, because if he takes here, knight takes f4, g5, h6, g6, knight takes g6 with the decisive threat h7 check. And opening up the h file is also favorable for Carlsen. For example, g takes h5, sorry. Rook takes, then there's a mate on h7, so g6 is forced. Rook h3, bishop f8, and then after doubling the rooks in the h file, black has to defend h8, so bishop g7, then bishop h6 to chase away this defender, the bishop, which has to retreat to h8. And then knight f4, knight takes, bishop takes. Now the bishop is threatened on h8, has to go to g7. Bishop h6 again, and then queen takes c6, and black cannot defend the king. For example, knight takes e5, then there's a nice bishop g5, bishop g7, and queen f6, with the idea that bishop takes and bishop takes would lead to a mate on the next move. So it's difficult to defend if the h file is opened, and therefore Nakamura rightly plays g5 here. h6, and again Naka cannot take the bishop because d takes f4, then h takes g7 would leave his king without protection. So he has to keep the h file closed as well, so g6 is the move. And bishop c1, and now Nakamura has managed to keep the h file closed, and the only immediate threat is that his c6 pawn is hanging. So how should he continue from here? Because it's not that easy to plan. Of course, he wants to create counterplay on the queen side. And a way to do this could be to open the a file. And is this at all possible? And in fact it is. Nakamura could have played knight 5 to b6 in this position. And then knight c5 wouldn't work because knight takes, d takes, and queen takes would easily equalize for Nakamura. So he would have to play knight takes b6, and then a takes b6, and all of a sudden Nakamura has some counterplay in the a file. For example, after b3, an idea for Naka here is to defend the c6 pawn by playing queen d5 and then double the rooks in the a file. So this was definitely a possible line, but instead Nakamura plays knight 7 to b6, and that invites Carlsen's knight back into play, knight c5. And now Naka has to take it before it continues to e4. So bishop takes c5, d takes b3, queen takes b3, and queen takes c5. And material is equal, but with a lot of open files and a lot of weaknesses on both sides. We could probably call this dynamically balanced. And the e5 pawn from Carlsen here is hanging, but Carlsen doesn't really care. He plays a very aggressive move, knight d4 here. He's willing to give up this e5 pawn in exchange for the g5 pawn, which will give his knight a much better position, more active position. So after rook takes e5, then knight f3, and then knight takes g5, which is this very good position for the knight, controlling h7 and also eyeing f7. And the knight cannot be chased away. f6 would lead to h7 check, king h8 and knight f7 check, and queening would be winning for Carlsen. So instead Nakamura plays queen e7 here, and then came queen d3, and now f6 fails to queen takes g6, king h8, and then the queen is falling. So rook f8 here. Then rook d to f1, pressure on f7 again. f5 now. And also winning for Carlsen here would have been h7 check, king g7, g4, knight f6, g takes f5, g takes, and rook f to g1, because the king is in all kinds of trouble. But Carlsen played g4, which is also a very good move. Knight a4 followed, and then came queen d4 here, with the simple threat h7 checkmate. Also winning was g takes f5, and if queen f6, hoping for tricks on b2, then Carlsen could have played queen b3. But queen d4 came, and then came queen e5, and a queen exchange follows here, and even after the queens are off the board, the name of the game is still king safety. G takes, knight f3, and rook e7, and then rook f to g1 check, and the king is in trouble. And in fact, Carlsen can take advantage of this and convert into a one endgame by rook g7 check, because rook takes, h takes, king takes, bishop h6 check, king g8, bishop takes, king takes would lead to a winning endgame for Carlsen. So instead Nakamura tried king h8, but then came rook h to g1, rook f to e8, knight h4, and in this position Nakamura played rook takes g7, and after making this move he resigned the game in view of rook takes g7, rook e6, knight g6 check, rook takes, and again we have this endgame which is clearly won for Carlsen. This game was perhaps not spectacular, and you can hardly say that Nakamura blundered at any point of the game, although he made a few inaccurate moves perhaps. But Carlsen judged the game perfectly. He saw that the poor king safety would be a problem for Nakamura, and this was indeed what decided the game in the end. I hope you enjoyed the game, and I hope to see you on my blog at klausjensen.com. Bye bye for now.